Good morning. I hope you're all refreshed and full of coffee and the toilet's there if you need it. Welcome to this morning's session where I'm hoping to talk to you about a really inspirational journey that we've been on with eGain. And it's something that started quite a while ago, actually. We've been working with eGain for a long time, and some of the things that we'll talk through today will explain how eGain have helped transform our business and transform our customer experience. So a little bit about EE to start with. Well, it began as T-Mobile originally as Mercury 121. It was founded in Borehamwood, not too far up the road, and it was rebranded and bought by Dutch Telecom in 1999. Orange was from Bristol in 1996. It was the first, the youngest company in fruition to ever enter the FTSE 100. And in 2010, they amalgamated together to form Everything Everywhere. And in 2012, we launched EE in October of 2012, and BT Group acquired EE for £12.5 billion in 2016. And actually, we're on a massive, massive investment plan at the moment, investing £15 billion in continuing to build Britain's biggest and best network. So we are the largest mobile operator in the UK. 19 million customers, 31 million connections, and quite excitingly, a 4G network that is really fast, and that's the thing that we're really passionate about, is the great speeds that we can offer. And we're also excited to be working with the emergency services and taking a contract to run their network to make sure that those real life-saving calls happen and connect straight away. So internally as a business, we've got 10,000 employees. We were really, really proud to be voted the Sunday Times best big company to work for. We've got over 600 stores up and down the country. And now, what you'll start to hear companies and telco companies talking about now is geographical coverage. So when we talk about population of people, EE covers about 98% of that now. But what we're trying to do is to ensure that we offer geographical coverage. So whether you're at the top of the highest mountain or you're in the farthest corner of the world, we might struggle to cover you in other parts of the world. If you're in the farthest corner of the country, we can still give you great signal and coverage. We've got quite a large customer service operation. So every single month, we handle 3.5 million calls. We make over 500,000 outbound calls every single month. In our UK-based contact centres, every single call that you make to EE customer service is handled inside the UK and Ireland. We've got 10 million customers registered on our app, which is just amazing for that kind of digital adoption. And our customers are happier than ever, which is good news. So what led us on our journey with eGain? Well, we found that there was a huge variation in performance and consistency of performance when we have advisors, some of whom were vastly experienced, some of whom were fantastic, some of whom really struggled. And actually, what I think is actually a good question, please, I would appreciate a hand in the air if this is the case for you. Have you ever rang a company, whether it's a utility company, a telco, have you ever rang a company, been told one answer, and you've rang them again, and you've been told a different answer? Please, a show of hands if you don't mind. This is going to save our market research people a fortune. Let me just note of that. It's true, okay? Because people don't always trust what we say to them. And that was one of the real challenges that we faced when we first launched EE. It was all done very quietly and hush-hush, and we launched that brand with a big bang. But actually, we didn't have the infrastructure brilliantly set up behind it, which meant that at some point 2 or 3 years ago, customers were contacting us, on average, 8 times a year. Now, I don't know about you, and it goes back to what Ashley said before, none of us really want to have to contact these companies, such as EE. We really just want that service to work, but to be contacted 8 times a year, that put us as one of the highest propensity to call companies in Europe. So we knew that there were some things that were causing that. So when you struggle for consistency, is it the people that try and deliver great service regardless of the process, or on the flip side, is it a process that you set up that delivers regardless of people? Well, what we wanted to do was to close the gap on that. So if you look at the standard business, so you choose any business, you're going to have average performers, you're going to have a small proportion of people that are fantastic, and a small proportion of people that perhaps need some support. And we wanted to shift that curve. We needed to lift the average up. We needed to close the gap, to get less people from the low-performing end and to create more people in the high-performing end. So that was the challenge. So, as well as that, it didn't really help that we had 4 knowledge tools. So whether you were handling a T-Mobile call, whether you were having an Orange call, and Orange guys had 2 systems to use, and in the very early phases of what we're going to come on to talk about. And one of the key things that we found is that only 10% of our knowledge base was used consistently. So when it was used, it was only really used 10% of the time. And that's scary when you think that, what are we saying to customers the rest of the time? And that's really where we've gone on this amazing journey. It was inconsistent. You know, the technology updates all the time. You know, we'll read the press today, there'll be a new phone release, there'll be a new device, there'll be a new piece of technology. And keeping that updated and keeping that relevant is really difficult. So when you've got multiple systems, it makes it very difficult to update one system and make sure it replicates into another system. So we were sometimes having one answer on one system and one answer on another system. I seem to have no longer be able to press the button. I just need to... Can we change this? Oh, there we go. We're back. That's what I was saying, so the inconsistent information. We also had tick sheets. Now, I don't know about you if you've ever worked in a role where you've got 2 screens in front of you and you've got all of this work going on. And on top of that, we're also expecting people to write down on a bit of paper the reasons that customers are contacting us. And that's inconsistent at best. We're never going to deliver great analytics of understanding what happens in a business when we've got, you know, our frontline advisors writing down the reasons that customers contact us. We had over 20,000 articles of information. And for an advisor on the phone to a customer, trying to deliver great service is really difficult when you're trying to sift through 20,000 articles to try and find what you're looking for. And actually what made it more difficult is we had 3 brands. So the information for EE was different to the process for Orange, different to the process for T-Mobile. So that was really difficult for us. So that leads us to the question of why eGain? Well, we'd worked with eGain previously. We've had a long-standing relationship with eGain for quite some time now. And we'd used their case-based reasoning for mobile diagnostics. It actually gave us a really good understanding into the capabilities of the product. And what it allows us to do is work with them. And I think the product capabilities are great, but they want to work with us. And we can go to them and say, actually, we've got this great new idea. And I think that's really good, is that it's a two-way street in terms of new ideas, new thought processes, and how we can improve that. They wanted to collaborate with us, and I think that's a really key one, really, because it's so important to a business when you're working with a vendor, and I'm sure you agree with your companies, that collaborative process really helps build a solid working relationship. And the thing for us is we change things very quickly. We have to, as I mentioned. And we needed a process that would allow us to implement changes very, very quickly to allow us to update for a situation or allow us to update quickly for a scenario. So, what did we do and what did we deliver? We took inspiration from the NHS. So, that's the National Health Service for those perhaps outside the UK. So when we took inspiration from the NHS, we did so because, I don't know about you, but if you've ever typed into a search engine symptoms of some kind of illness, I constantly have a rare Colombian disease somehow. But the idea is, the NHS's triage system that gives you some very simple yes, no, question and answers really helps deliver great service. And we can't afford to get it wrong. These guys absolutely can't afford to get it wrong. But for our customers, we can't afford to get it wrong as well. So we created a system, and one thing that I think is real fun is that we love it when our advisors and our frontline teams can get involved in the naming of some of these systems. It's not System McSystem Face, you'd be pleased to know. What we did do, though, is we gave the advisors a chance to name the system. Has anyone seen Only Fools and Horses? It wasn't named after Uncle Albert. It was, however, named after Albert Einstein, the German-born theoretical physicist. And we've got some pretty big shoes to fill when we're calling our system Albert. So some of the key things of Albert, and this is what our advisors use every single day. So you call EE, if you're a subscriber. If you contact EE, you will be guided through help with our advisors using a system called Albert. And what it does is it allows us to pass key information from other systems, so our main CRMs and some of the other tools that we use, and it allows us to feed that information into the system, which actually means that we don't need to ask as many questions. So it's helped us reduce our average handle time already, which is fab. It also allows us to pause and resume, because sometimes, can you switch your phone off? Can you try this for 24 hours? Can you go away and do whatever we've asked you to do if it's a technical support query. And sometimes that means that we have to pause a session, leave it where it is, and make sure that we pick it up at another time. And the reason this is important is, and again, I'm asking kind of just for your thoughts, but have you ever, when you've contacted a company, you've gone away to have to do something, and you call back up again and they say, I'm really sorry, there's no record of your conversation. I'm sorry, I didn't know that had been done. And it happens, yeah? It happens. So every single time you interact with one of our frontline teams, there is a record of that conversation that's kept both in Albert, and it transfers through into our CRM system as well. So we always know the questions and answers that you've been asked, and indeed, we can help you next time you come back through. And I think that history is really good because that saving of the session means it's really easy for us to be able to transfer from one team to another. So if you call up with a technical support query and we can't fix it there and then, we may escalate it to one of our level 2 technical support teams. We allow you to save the session, and then we send you on to another advisor who then picks up the session as a level 2, and they can then take that flow on and move forward with it. And I said there, it allows us to go to our CRM. So, this is Albert. This is the front screen. Now, what I think is really interesting, and I'm sure it's the same, so I don't think my son will ever go to a time where we sit on a keyboard with a mouse. I'm sure at some point it'll happen in a job. But actually, my son, who's 7, when he uses a tablet, it's touchscreen. Yeah? All of our phones now are pretty much touchscreen. And I think this is a really, really clever way of setting up the front screen of a system. Bearing in mind, there's still over 20,000 articles behind here. But what we've done is, we've allowed you the opportunity as a frontline advisor simply to click and to start the journey with the customer. So it's intuitive because it gives you the top items that a customer may wish to call us about. And it allows us then to start along that journey of question and answers that will guide us to the details. And some of the results that I'm going to share with you in a little while really are quite exceptional. So this is what the advisor sees, and we've already pre-answered questions, which is great. So we know that, what phone you're on, what talk plan you've got, etc., etc. And we'll never present the wrong information. That's one of the key things about this, is that you will only ever be presented with information that's relevant to your device. So if you're on an Android, you don't want to know how to do an Apple process, and vice versa. So this is what our advisors see. Also, has anybody heard of this little thing called GDPR? First version of this had all the customer information on, so that's been taken out now, so that's good. So this is what the advisor sees. So on this side here, it's really simple. Is there a direct debit set up? But what we don't expect our frontline teams to do is to sit there at the desk and say, have you got a direct debit set up? That's not personal. That's not what we're about in terms of our customer experience. And that's why we've seen some great improvements in some of these customer metrics as a result of encouraging our advisors to be personal. So if you call E, you may get through to somebody in Greenock up in Scotland, down in Plymouth, and they will answer the phone to you and say, hi, you're through to Dave in Plymouth, how can I help? We really want to personalize that experience. So we're not turning our advisors into robots, we're simply giving them the correct question to ask, which will then guide us to the flow that will get us to the resolution. So it's split into 3 parts. The first part is the question. The second part, at this point, is an opportunity, if it's appropriate, to offer a sales potential or an ability to upsell. And what it also does as well, it gives us really clear step-by-step instructions on exactly what to do. So there's no ambiguity, there's no way that we can get this wrong. We know exactly what our frontline teams need to do to handle that customer's query and to get it right. We found it reduces our handling time. We're not scathing through 20,000 different documents to try and find a process. It's already guided us on there. It actually makes sure that, because of the logic that we add to it, and because we know what phone you're using, and we know what talk plan you're on, and we know if you pay as you go, and we know that you're roaming, so we will always present the right information, and we'll stop you from taking incorrect routes. It also allows us, and we've spoken about it already, to talk about automation. And I thought automate the boring that was mentioned this morning was a really interesting one, because that ability to automate means that we save more time for our advisors. And actually, we haven't got them double keying from one system to another. We do that for them to give them time to really concentrate on that customer experience. And what it allows us to do is we can get any process, we can tailor it to any brand, and we can make sure that actually it's only one piece of page, but actually you can attack it from all 3 of the brands and it'll still present the same page of information because it's not different for the brands. So, this is what we present to the advisors, yeah? And I think that's a much bigger version of it for you now to see. This is the key thing for us, though, the feedback. So, what I find really interesting is we want to keep things simple. We want to keep things up to date. And when I talk about the team that run this from EE side in a moment, there's one person that we rely on more than anybody else, and that's the advisor. We need to know when it's not right. That feedback loop is really important. It may be something small like a grammatical error, or it could actually be a fundamental change that we need to make, which has been spotted by our advisors that talk to our customers. So on every single page, there's a feedback button. It's really easy. Pop in your team leader's name and give us that feedback. And what happens is, when that gets sent off at the other side, we get 24 hours. So the content teams will reply to each individual piece of feedback within 24 hours. And I think that's fantastic, because if I'm the advisor and I'm the person that's taking the time out of my wrap time or my hold time or my available time to send this feedback, I want to know that it's been received and I want to know that it's been looked at. And I think that's a really, really clever and intuitive and simple way. Send the feedback, we get it back within 24 hours. So that's no mean feat, but like anything in a large organization, we need to govern changes. So we have 2.2 million sessions of this every month. This system is used over 2 million times every single month, which is incredible. We get 2,500 pieces of feedback every month. And it's really important that when so many people are suggesting changes, 2,500 changes every month, it's really important that we look at governance. Now, my challenge is to put up what looks like the world's most boring slide. Got to be honest, governance isn't particularly exciting, is it? But what I promise to try and do is to try and keep it as simple as possible, because when you see that, it looks like a load of, yeah? However, the actual process itself is really simple. We want to empower the teams that manage the background of Albert to be able to make those changes themselves. So any piece of feedback that comes in could come from any of these channels. So it could be from the props teams and the brand teams. It could be feedback from the advisors that we've just spoken about. It could be requests from members of senior management. Everything that goes into the team goes into the CS knowledge team. So we have a dedicated team of people whose sole job it is to keep this system live, update, and relevant. So there's 3 sets of changes. So we allow 3 sets of changes through our CS knowledge team. If it's a small change, grammatical error, spelling mistake, they can be changed instantly and changed in the system. So that's great. We don't have a huge amount of governance around that. If it's a medium change, what we tend to do is we work with the process owners, design, delivery teams, that kind of thing, and we obtain the sign-off from them, or add any additional changes, that kind of thing. And what we do find is that these changes, when we're making changes that may only save 2 or 3 seconds, over the course of 12 months, that's several FTE for us as a business, because we handle so many calls. 2 million calls, or 2 million times this is used every single month. If we reduce the handle time by 2 seconds, you can see the benefit of us doing that. So that's why the governance model is so important. So what we tend to do is for the medium changes, it does indeed go through more governance. So we go to the heads of the operation and the directors of the operation to check that they're comfortable with it. We go to the comms team, because it's really important that when we're making these changes, that we tell the advisors. I think if you've worked with teams of people that work in contact centers, they say, we don't mind telling customers anything. We just want to know that it's there. We just want to know that it's changed. And I think that's a really important one. And finally, there are some large changes that go through the business. It tends not to be a huge amount. A new product launch, Apple device, Android device, that kind of thing. So when we're getting the content for all of that, that gets single-handedly managed by the head of the team, who will manage that himself and work with his teams around him to make sure that we get that put through. And then once it's all done, we get it into the process and it's done. So I apologize for lots of information on the screen, but it really is as simple as request comes in, it goes to the knowledge team, we make sure that the operational and all of the heads of that need to make those decisions are comfortable with it, and it then goes into triage and is into the system. What I find really quite incredible for a large company to do is that we can take it from the request all the way through to the gateway in 9 days. So if we wanted to, we can make changes within 9 days. And actually, in some of the organizations that we've perhaps worked in over the years, 9 days is a breath of fresh air, given that sometimes these things to change in a system can take 3 months, 2 months. And that's the power of the kind of relationship we have with eGain, is that they've given us that platform to be able to make changes, even large-scale changes, in a small period of time. So here's what we delivered. We rolled out all of the content that was written by our best advisors, and that's really key. So when we talk about the staff, I'll mention how the team's structured. But it really is important for us to take key information and that learning and that knowledge from the people who know it best, our advisors. So we second in on a 6-monthly basis that allows fresh knowledge, fresh information, and we then send them back to the operation to go and embed back into their current role. And what that means is that we constantly get fresh new ideas from new members of staff, and it's a great experience for them if they've worked in a frontline CS role to have that opportunity to work in more so of a support role. The training was really interesting because when you've got 10,000 advisors, I mean, how do you train something to 10,000 people? We're talking on a massive scale. And luckily, because it's a simple and intuitive system, it didn't take a huge amount of time, but it was a massive learning curve, and I want to talk about that in the results in a second. Because everybody has people in the business that think they probably know more than the system tells them that they do, and we definitely had people in our teams that went, I don't need this, I know what I'm doing. And I think the results from there are really interesting when we come onto it. So, here's some of the results, and this is the exciting bit for me, because we, in the front line, had a massive, massive increase in first contact resolution. Absolutely huge. So when guided help, which is what we call our Albert sessions, our advisors run guided help, when guided help was not used, our first contact resolution was 62%. So 4 in 10 customers were contacting us back. They didn't believe us, they didn't trust us. When we use it correctly, FCR measures regularly, consistently, and the proof's in the pudding at 85%. Which for a business, that's fantastic to know that 85% of the time when someone's coming through, we absolutely nail it and we absolutely get it right. Our customer satisfaction has massively improved as well, because going back to what I said at the start, you want to trust and believe in what you're told when somebody calls through to your customer service teams. And our customers believe us now because we've got the right system to give us the right answer every single time. So we've got a 30-point increase, it's percentage on there, we've got a 30-point increase in NPS, and we've also massively reduced our complaints. It was a real problem for EE going back a few years. But it's something that we've really focused on by building a very strict and stringent process that we expect our advisors to follow. If a customer is dissatisfied, we absolutely follow the process, and it means we resolve more, and as a result, we've massively lowered our complaints. And this is a key one as well. We've managed to massively reduce our training time for our frontline teams. So when you were new into the business and we brought you into a contact center role, it used to take us around 2 weeks to get you trained. And the reason for that is we would have to teach you all the plans, all the products, all the services, all of the processes. Now we teach you how to use Albert. We teach you how to use guided help. And we then do scenario-based training that says, find it. Go and find the answer. And it gives us 8 days now to absolutely home in on those personal conversations that we want our advisor to have with the teams. And that's a really key one for us is goes back to what I said, we don't want them to be robots. We absolutely want them to have their own enthusiasm and their own passion. And to reduce training down from 14 working days to 8 working days or less, I think is amazing. And there's a cost saving, of course, in that as well. We get teams in quicker. I have a problem. One of the parts of the business I run is making sure that the logins arrive properly, and we had to completely overhaul the way we did that because we'd reduced the training time. We had advisors in their kind of grad-based situations, and we hadn't had the logins ready for them because we used to have 2 weeks to make logins, and now we've only got a week. So one opportunity presents itself as another problem goes away. So. And this is another key one, is that we found that on average it used to take about 6 months for our frontline advisors to be able to get absolutely up to speed to a point where their performance kind of plateaus around where you'd expect performance for a performer to be. And that's now reduced to 3 months, with half the time it takes on that curve to get to the right level. And that for us is great, because if you're coming through to us, we absolutely want that person you're speaking to be the very best that they can be. And we want them to be at the right level as quickly as possible. So for us, a 50% improvement in speed to competency is huge. So, in summary, we have consistent information, a better experience, we now have great customer service for the customer. For the business, our first contact resolution has increased, which is just incredible. It means that we knew we had to improve first contact resolution. We love our customers, but we don't want to hear from them. We're just really happy if you're happy and not having to get in touch with us. We've now aligned that handling time. So it means that we're consistent. Because we're giving the same information, we're asking the same questions. Yes, there's some personal conversations around that as well, but we've now got a consistent handle time. We've reduced complaints, we've reduced training. And I think for the advisors, it's just made it really simple. No longer do you need to learn every single thing about every single thing. You can really just concentrate on the customer and let the system and let the knowledge and let the information do all that for you. We set demanding targets for our frontline teams. We really do. We push them, we challenge them, we want them to achieve those. And we're finding on a monthly basis now, we have huge proportions of our customer service teams that are absolutely achieving bonus because they don't have to worry about their kind of own lack of confidence around something. All they know is they follow the process, it will absolutely fix it for our customers. So that's really good news for our advisors. Very happy. So I think one of the other key things for us is beyond that. So let's step away from the frontline role at the moment. So the agent follows the guided help. So we know that when a frontline advisor follows the guided help, we know the questions that have been asked back and forth, which is great. What we then do is we analyze those call reasons. And this is a really interesting part and something that if you don't already do in your business, I think is this knowledge and information that we have available to us is incredible. So we find the reasons that customers called us. We thought that there was a massive problem with the answer phone a few years ago. It wasn't. It was just because answer phone was the first thing alphabetically. So people would click the first one and start a session. So we were panicking, thinking there's problems with answer phone, and there isn't. So the reason that we use this now, and in the kind of tablet screen almost that you saw on the front page of Albert, allows us to no longer have things in an alphabetical order. So we find the reasons for the call. What we then do is add our own metrics in there as well. So we know that flow X, which might be my phone won't switch on. We also know, because we've got that tag of that session, we can then associate that with an advisor, who they are. We can then associate with, well, did the customer send a text about the customer service? We can then associate it with, did the customer contact us again? Yes or no, so we know whether the process works. We can then associate it with, what's the score that customer gave us? And that gives us a real insight by adding our own information on top of the information that we get from eGain, allows us to absolutely pinpoint where a process is working and where it isn't. And that helps us for two reasons. One, it helps us with call drivers. We obviously want to find and fix things that aren't working straight away. And secondly, and this was a real kind of mind-boggling one for me. I've had the pleasure of running teams in a contact center before, and I would always sit somebody down to do their training, do their coaching, do their mentoring, and it would be a case of really trying to understand what it was they wanted to learn about. And what we've got now is a system and a tool that will tell us exactly which call types this person struggles with. We could listen to calls from that. We also tag the call recording. So we can then listen to why that advisor's struggling. Why did that customer score us poorly? Why did that customer contact us back again? We can get that information and we can tailor our coaching and personalized conversations for our frontline managers to their advisors on exactly what they need to improve their customer service. And I really do think that's incredible. So for us as a business, it absolutely goes wider than the kind of CS teams. We use that a lot. We use a lot of the information. I mean, when you look on, these are probably not so easy for you to see, but what this will allow you to do, we can see every single call, every single route that our guided help system has, how many calls go through it, what the FCR was, what the MPS was. We can get that level of detail for every single one. And what it allows us to do, as part of that, is tells us what are the top 15 low first contact resolution calls. And what's the top 15 low MPS calls? Well, typically, you'll get a low MPS of something like complaints, and we absolutely understand you're not going to score a business 10 when you're raising a complaint. But what it allows us to do is to identify and associate trends, and it allows us to help tailor the system and tailor the machinery to make sure that we handle those calls better the next time. So it really does help us prioritize with our activities. I think this is the bit I mentioned here, and we've also hidden the customer information again, GDPR, they'll be happy. It's great that the advisors themselves can listen to calls. This isn't just a coaching thing. So we will allow every single one of our advisors to listen to every single one of their calls because it encourages them to want to do a better job, we've found. It allows us to search for, as a manager, other advisors. So if somebody calls up and says they want to make a complaint about how they were spoken to last time, we can hear that. We can absolutely support the customers if they have that. And what they're also able to do as managers is share best practice. So if you've got an advisor in your team who is absolutely fantastic, what we want to do is share that and share that call with other members of the management team and their teams. So that's really been a game changer for us in terms of being able to have this amount of information out of the back of what is a frontline, a front user, an end user system, and that's really great for us. So some of the things that we've learned, and this is interesting because I heard Ashley say this morning that we actually have dual screens. So every single one of our frontline teams, 6,500, has 2 screens in front of them. And we found that on average reduced a call by about 7 seconds. But when you're handling 3.5 million calls a month, you times that over 12 months, and you can tell we didn't take very long to pay off those extra screens that we put on everybody's desk. And I think what we found is that the 2 screens really allows you to have Albert on one side with your yes and no questions. And what it allows us to do on the other side is to then have the CRM system or any other knowledge articles or any other information that you want. So we can handle calls quicker, easier, and with less mistakes. In terms of reporting, it really allowed us to drive compliance. And we expect our frontline advisors to use this on 90% of calls. And we expect that. And we will performance manage against it because the system will give you the correct answer. We expect you to use the system. That 10% is an allowance for obvious things. You will occasionally get a call that comes through that there's absolutely nothing in the system that you'll be able to know. We've all heard of these kind of strange scenarios that might come through. But we're really key on the reporting, and we want our leaders in the organization to really drive that compliance with their teams. Which leads me on to the cultural shift, because having been in a management role myself when we first introduced this, there were people in my team that went, I don't need that. I know the answer to this. I don't need this. You're slowing me down. I'm having to answer this. And you can see the difference in performance, the 60 versus 80. And what we found is if we ever take this away from people now, and I just want to say we've not had an issue for over 3 years, so I think that's testament. We've had no problem for well over 3 years. If we ever have an internal issue with our internet as a business, if we remove, and you can't get onto guided help or onto Albert, it's panic stations. We've got people crazy. And what we found is that people absolutely use it now, and even the cultured staff that have been around for a long time have grown to love it, is probably the best way to say it. And it did take a bit of time to grow, because it's something that was completely different. New people into the organization are fine because they've always had a question and answer session, but those people that have been in the business a long time did take a little while to make a cultural shift. Which does lead me on to the kind of IT resiliency, and it is a credit to eGain that we haven't had any kind of issue for well over 3 years. When you're handling that many interactions every single day, reliability is key, absolutely key. We can't afford to have 2.5 million interactions or the numbers every single week, not having the ability to be able to service those customers with the right level of service. And that's all down to having a reliable platform, both us as an internal IT network and also with the eGain platform. Excuse me. So, what's next with eGain? Well, this is really exciting because we're upgrading to our new eGain version either at the end of this month or at the very beginning of June, which is great news. We want to continue to work with eGain to allow us to make improvements to our guided help principles. We want to make sure we continue to listen to the advisors and optimize our guided help. We also want to do further automation, and we're really excited about the AI-guided self-service to drive the savings, to support our colleagues in the front line, which is really exciting. And we actually want to enhance that front screen further. How do we develop that? How do we make that even better? But more importantly, we want to make it more intuitive for our advisors to find out what they need, and more importantly, to find out what they need quickly. So at EE, we use Albert and guided help 2.2 million times every single month. We have 10,000 advisors using the system. We have 1 head of knowledge, we've got 2 managers, and 27 content authors, updating and creating and responding to feedback, all in one system. Albert, powered and hosted by eGain. Thank you.